Welcome back to Conversations That Awaken by Joe Bandra. If you've been with us since episode 1, thank you for taking this journey with us. Over the first 10 episodes, we've questioned many of the assumptions most of us inherited without ever examining them. We've explored the nature of reality, the illusion of separation, the origins of belief, the question of God, the self-organizing universe, the fact of being, the limits of language, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. You may have noticed that we've returned to some of the same ideas more than once. That wasn't by accident. Some truths cannot be understood by hearing them only once. They must be approached from different angles, examined through different lenses, and reflected upon until they become your own direct insight. Repetition is not about convincing you, it is about inviting you to observe more deeply. Our purpose has never been to give you another belief system. It has always been to encourage you to examine, question, investigate, and ultimately understand for yourself. Because borrowed knowledge is information. Direct experience, on the other hand, is transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to begin with episode 1. Each conversation builds upon the previous one, forming a journey from questioning the world to questioning the one who believes they are separate from it. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening. Take a moment to become fully present. Set aside, just for a little while, everything you think you know. And together, let's question everything. I am Kim. I hope you had the opportunity to read or listen to Finding Neve by Joe Bandra. The name Neve, heaven spelled backward, symbolizes a journey of self-discovery, an inward return to the source of true happiness. It is an invitation to look beyond the stories we tell ourselves, rediscover our authentic nature, and awaken to the peace and wholeness that have always been within us.
Every single cell in your body right now, it's fundamentally different from the ones you had a decade ago.
Yeah, completely different.
Right. I mean, your skin, your bones, even the structure of your brain, they have completely turned over.
It's basically a full biological remodel.
Exactly. And on top of that, your memories are constantly being, retroactively edited by your own neurology. So when you sit there and say, I am going to die, completely seriously, who exactly is the I you are talking about?
Well, I mean, it is basically the single most unsettling question a human being can ask.
Oh, for sure.
We operate under this, massive, unexamined assumption of a continuous self. We just assume there is this solid, unchanging entity looking out through our eyes, traveling from birth all the way to the grave.
Right, like a little passenger inside the head.
Yeah, exactly. But the moment you actually put that assumption under a microscope, whether you use biology, psychology, or philosophy, the solidity of that, it vanishes.
Which is exactly what we are tearing into today. We are pulling from some incredibly dense, really paradigm-shifting excerpts from Joe Bandra's upcoming book, The Nature of Reality.
It's such a fantastic text.
It really is. And Bandra essentially takes this universal terror we all harbor, the fear of our own mortality, and he forces us to look at the premise of the fear rather than the fear itself.
Because we spend our entire lives running from the concept of death.
Oh, entirely. We build whole industries, religions, psychological defense mechanisms just to avoid looking at it. But the framing question we have to grapple with today, and the mission of this deep dive for you listening, is this: what if the thing we are so terrified of losing isn't actually what we are at all?
Right, because if you are running from the loss of an illusion, the fear itself is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of your own reality.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And our objective here isn't to comfort anyone with new beliefs or, replace an old worldview with a shinier, more palatable spiritual concept.
Because beliefs are just thoughts you keep repeating, right?
Exactly. The invitation the text presents is to investigate your direct experience. So we're going to deconstruct this idea of the self through 5 different frameworks or lenses.
Starting with the physical.
Right. We start with the tangible physical body, then move through the psychological mind, historical philosophy, the mystical traditions, and ultimately we land on direct, unmediated knowing.
Let's just dive right into that first one, the physical body. Because this is the most entrenched assumption.
Oh, absolutely.
If you ask anyone on the street who they are, the default reflex is, they point to their chest like, I am this physical form.
Yeah, I am this body.
And human society is essentially a monument to this assumption. I mean, we insure this body. We decorate it, we photograph it, we obsess over its dimensions, we compare it relentlessly to other bodies.
All we do, entire global economies. I mean, think about healthcare, fitness, fashion, cosmetics.
And, I mean, that obsession makes perfect evolutionary sense, right? Like, from a survival standpoint.
Sure, yeah. The organism has to protect itself to propagate. But when we transition from evolutionary biology to the question of actual identity, this massive contradiction emerges.
Because we act as though the body is a static, permanent object that we occupy.
Right. We treat it like a house we live in that never changes. Yet the biological reality of neuroplasticity, cellular regeneration, metabolic turnover, it all proves that you are not a static object at all.
You're a process.
Exactly. You are a flowing stream of biological material.
Which brings up the source's analogy, right?
Yeah.
The physiological ship of Theseus.
Real paradox, yeah.
Yeah, if you replace every single plank of wood on a ship over time, is it the same ship or, taking it to a house? If you replace every single brick in a house one by one until no original bricks remain, is it the same house?
And applying that to human biology, the turnover is just staggering.
It really is. We know the stomach lining replaces itself in days, the skin in weeks, red blood cells in a matter of months.
Even the skeleton, which is crazy to me.
Right. The skeleton feels like the most permanent, immutable scaffolding of our existence. But it is constantly being broken down by osteoclasts and rebuilt by osteoblasts.
It's a constant construction zone.
Exactly. So the physical matter sitting in a chair listening to this right now, literally, structurally, did not exist in this configuration a decade ago. It was dirt, water, and atmospheric gas.
And the profound implication of that cellular turnover is usually just, well, it's glossed over.
Like fun trivia.
Right. We acknowledge it as a neat scientific trivia fact, but we don't let it penetrate our actual sense of identity. I mean, think about it. If nearly every atom in your physical form has been swapped out, and yet the internal subjective feeling of me has remained entirely uninterrupted.
The feeling of being you hasn't flickered.
Exactly. Then whatever that me is, it absolutely cannot be intrinsically tied to the specific physical matter, because the matter is transient, it comes and goes, but the sense of self is continuous.
But wait, let me push back on that a little bit, because the common counter-argument there is genetic continuity.
Okay, lay it on me.
Yes, the individual cells die and are replaced, but the DNA blueprint remains identical, right? The instructions don't change. So even if the biological bricks are swapped out, the architectural blueprint is the exact same. Doesn't that fundamental genetic code provide the physical anchor for identity? Doesn't that make it the same body?
I mean, it provides biological continuity, certainly. You will keep growing the same color hair, largely. But consider the phenomenology of your own existence.
What do you mean?
You don't experience yourself as a sequence of nucleotides, right? When you wake up in the morning, you don't feel a deep, subjective identification with a double helix.
No, definitely not.
You feel like a conscious agent experiencing a physical space. The genetic blueprint dictates the shape, the biological tendencies, the parameters of the vehicle, but it does not account for the driver.
Oh, that's a great distinction. The vehicle versus the driver.
Right. If the vehicle is constantly being disassembled and reassembled while you are driving down the highway, and the driver's sense of presence never blinks out for even a second, we have to conclude that the body is just an experience the driver is having.
It is something we have, not what we fundamentally are.
Precisely. The body is an object in our awareness.
Just like a car we're driving. I mean, we wouldn't confuse ourselves with the steering wheel, even if we held onto it our entire lives.
Exactly. We perceive the body, we feel its weight, its temperature, its aches and pains. And by definition, if you can perceive an object, you are the perceiver, not the object itself.
Because the eyeball can't see itself.
Right. You are the subjective space in which the perception of the body occurs.
Which naturally forces us to abandon the physical form as the seat of the true self. And I think when people realize they aren't merely a static collection of biological cells, they retreat inward. They retreat into the mind.
They fall back to the psychological lens number 2.
Right. They claim the psychological identity. They say, okay, fine, I'm not my changing body, but I am my personality. I am the sum total of my memories, my traumas, my achievements, my political leanings, all my unique quirks.
And the psychological defense is much, much harder to penetrate because it feels so intimate.
It feels like it's us.
Yeah, the physical body is outward facing, everyone can see it, but our internal narrative feels like our exclusive private domain. The assumption is that this internal storyline constitutes a permanent, independent self.
But the source text asks us to apply the exact same timeline scrutiny to the psyche that we just applied to the biology.
And when you do that, it falls apart almost immediately.
Oh, totally. I mean, the psychological gap between the 5-year-old version of yourself and the adult version listening right now is just, it's a chasm.
It's not even the same person.
No. The 5-year-old's entire universe revolved around, like, immediate gratification, the location of a favorite toy, a highly simplistic moral binary of good and bad.
Right.
The neuroses, the sophisticated anxieties, the political ideologies you hold today simply did not exist back then.
They didn't exist at all, and yet you say, when I was 5.
Exactly.
You claim ownership over a psychological entity that has absolutely zero resemblance to your current operating system. I mean, think of the adolescent version of you.
Oh, I'd rather not.
Right. Usually consumed by social hierarchy, hormonal volatility, a completely different set of aesthetic and cultural preferences. The music you liked, the people you idealized, the fundamental beliefs you held about how the world works. For most people, those have all been radically overwritten.
Overwritten is the perfect word for it. It functions exactly like a software update that completely deprecates the older versions.
Yeah, version 1.0 of your personality is entirely incompatible with version 14.0.
You literally cannot run those old programs anymore. So if the opinions, the emotional reactions, the beliefs, and the tastes are all in a state of constant flux, just like the biological cells, we try to anchor the psychological self in our history instead.
We cling to the past.
Right. We say, okay, my tastes change, but my memories are who I am. My past is the solid ground.
And that is exactly where modern cognitive science delivers the most devastating blow to this idea of a solid psychological self.
Because memory is totally flawed.
Beyond flawed. We have this intuitive sense that human memory works like a video camera, archiving raw footage to a hard drive in our brain.
Like we can just hit play on an old file.
Right. We assume that when we remember a childhood event, we are accessing a pristine, objective recording of reality. When
in reality, neuroscience shows us that memory retrieval is a process of active reconstruction. It's called reconsolidation.
It's a fascinating mechanism.
It is, because every single time you recall a memory, the neural pathways holding that information become temporarily malleable. You pull the memory out of the archive, and before you put it back, your brain actively updates it.
It updates it based on who you are today.
Exactly.
Your current emotional state, your current biases, your current worldview, they all act as an aggressive editorial filter.
It's wild.
I mean, if you had a difficult breakup 10 years ago, the way you remembered it the day after is vastly different from the way you remember it today after, say, finding a happy marriage.
Because the context changed.
Right. The brain literally alters the emotional weight, it fills in missing visual details with plausible fabrications, and it smooths out the narrative to ensure it makes sense to your current identity.
Which means we are rarely remembering the actual event.
Yeah.
We're remembering the last time we remembered the event.
It's exactly like a neurological game of telephone.
So wait. It feels like our memories are a permanent factual record. But if our brain is just playing editor and constantly revising our autobiography behind the scenes, are we just clinging to a ghost story we tell ourselves?
That is precisely what we are doing. The brain is not a historian. It is a narrative engine.
A narrative engine.
Yeah. Its primary biological function is to maintain a cohesive, continuous storyline so that the organism can function effectively in its environment. So it edits out the contradictions. The autobiography you cherish, the story you tell yourself about who you are and how you got here functionally, it is a living, breathing fiction.
That is a terrifying realization.
It really pulls the rug out from under you.
Because if the biological body is just a transient stream of matter, and the psychological personality is a highly edited, unstable fiction, what is left? Where is the permanence? Where do we look for a permanent self?
Well, this is the existential crisis that has kept the greatest minds in human history awake at night.
Right, which brings us to the third lens, the philosophical lens.
Exactly. When you strip away the biology and you deconstruct the psychology, you inevitably enter the domain of philosophy. Human beings have spent millennia trying to locate the irreducible core of the self.
A text synthesizes a lot of this history to show just how elusive this core really is.
The inevitable starting point for Western thought, as the text outlines, is René Descartes.
Sure, the classic.
Right. Descartes famously decided to subject everything in existence to absolute rigorous doubt.
It was like the ultimate intellectual demolition project. He doubted the existence of the physical world. He doubted his own senses. He doubted his memory. He stripped the house all the way down to the studs, trying to find one single, undeniable truth that couldn't be doubted.
And he landed on his famous maxim, cogito ergo sum.
I think, therefore I am.
Exactly. He concluded that even if he was being deceived about literally everything else, the very act of doubting was a form of thinking. And thinking, logically, requires a thinker.
The existence of the thought proves the existence of the I generating it.
Which gave Western philosophy a tremendous sigh of relief. It provided an anchor.
But taking the source materials approach, I look at Descartes' quote, which is basically a cultural bumper sticker at this point, and I see a massive, unexamined linguistic trap.
Oh, absolutely.
I think, therefore I am. That premise inherently assumes that every single thought requires a separate, localized owner. It assumes there is a little manager sitting in the control room of the brain generating the thoughts.
It assumes a fundamental duality, the creator of the thought and the thought itself.
Right, but think about looking up at the sky. You see clouds drifting across. You don't assume that every single cloud requires its own personal, invisible manager to push it across the atmosphere. Or that every cloud needs its own personal piece of sky to exist.
Right, that would be absurd.
The clouds are just a phenomenon occurring within the space of the sky, based on atmospheric conditions. What if thoughts are exactly the same? What if the thoughts are just happening on their own? What if they're just cognitive weather patterns occurring in the mind?
That is a phenomenal critique. And it mirrors the exact flaw that later empiricists and Eastern traditions zeroed in on. You see, Descartes was constrained by the grammatical structure of his own language.
How so?
Well, English, Latin, French, they all require a subject, a verb, and an object. Because the syntax of his language requires an I to precede the verb think, Descartes just assumed that language reflected ultimate reality.
He confused grammar with existence.
Yes. He assumed a permanent, separate entity must exist to perform the action of thinking because that's how his sentences were built.
But when you actually observe your own mind, you don't author most of your thoughts. They just appear.
They pop up out of nowhere.
Exactly. I mean, if I tell you right now, do not think of a pink elephant immediately appears in your consciousness.
Yep, there it is.
You didn't deliberately author that thought. It happened to you. It's like saying, it is raining. Who is the it doing the raining?
There is no entity doing the raining.
Right. Raining is just a process that is happening. Thinking might just be a process that is happening.
Which is exactly the realization that David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, arrived at when he decided to actually test Descartes' theory.
Through rigorous introspection.
Right. Hume decided he wasn't going to just rely on logic or grammatical syntax. He was going to look inward and try to actually observe this thinker. He wanted to catch the eye in the act.
And when he turned his attention inward, what did that process actually look like?
Well, he sat and closely observed the contents of his own consciousness, and he reported that whenever he tried to look for his core self, he only stumbled upon some particular perception or another.
Like what?
He found a physical sensation of heat from the fire. He found an emotion of melancholy. He found a fleeting memory of a conversation. He found a rapid succession of visual images.
Just transient stuff.
Exactly. But the one thing he never found was the underlying independent self that supposedly possessed all these experiences.
So he searched the room for the observer and only found furniture.
That's a brilliant way to put it, yes. He concluded that the self is nothing more than a bundle or collection of different perceptions which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity.
The bundle theory.
Right. He realized that the feeling of a continuous identity is just an illusion created by the speed of passing phenomena.
It's like a flipbook of still images creating the illusion of continuous motion.
Exactly like a flipbook. There is no permanent self in the flipbook. There is only the rapid replacement of one image with the next.
That drastically changes the landscape. If Hume is right, we are essentially walking verbs rather than nouns.
Verbs, exactly.
We are a process of experiencing, not a permanent entity that experiences.
And this insight didn't stop with Hume. When you look at other historical thinkers, like Arthur Schopenhauer, they take this even further. Schopenhauer suggested that the entire world as we experience it is entirely our own representation, bound by our localized perception.
And then Baruch Spinoza zoomed out to the ultimate macro level.
Spinoza is fascinating here. He argued against the idea of separate, independent objects entirely. He proposed that there is only one infinite substance.
One unified reality.
Yes, and that everything, every galaxy, every human body, every single passing thought is merely a temporary, localized expression of that one whole.
So in Spinoza's view, you aren't a separate entity standing apart from the universe. You are a specific behavior of the universe.
Like a wave is a behavior of the ocean.
It's a dizzying intellectual journey.
Okay.
But I feel like here's the problem with stopping at the philosophical lens. We can debate the nuances of Hume's bundle theory versus Spinozan monism all day long,
Yeah.
but understanding these concepts intellectually rarely translates into an actual shift in how we experience life. You know, you can read Hume in the morning, feel very enlightened, and still be absolutely consumed by road rage during your afternoon commute.
Oh, defending your fragile ego against the guy who cut you off in traffic. Absolutely.
Right. So philosophy gives us fascinating concepts to debate, but concepts alone don't change how we experience life.
Because intellectual understanding is merely the accumulation of new concepts. And concepts, no matter how profound or accurate they are still just more thoughts appearing in the mind.
It's just more weather.
Exactly. If the goal is to discover what exists beyond the shifting mind, thinking about it is just the wrong tool for the job. It's like trying to use a microscope to study the nature of sound.
You're using the wrong instrument entirely.
Yes. So to find direct experience, we have to transition into the fourth framework the text lays out, the mystical lens. We have to look at the traditions that specialize not in philosophical debate, but in the systematic deconstruction of the perceiving subject.
We are looking for the undying awareness. And what I find so compelling about this section of the source material is the sheer historical consensus.
It's undeniable.
You are looking at contemplatives, mystics, and seekers across vastly different geographies, centuries, and cultural frameworks. These are people who had zero contact with each other, speaking totally different languages, using entirely different theological systems.
Different eras, different dogmas.
Yet, when they turn their attention completely inward, they all map the exact same internal territory.
The convergence is staggering. When you bypass the theological dogma of these religions and look at the actual experiential core of these traditions, they all point to a singular, astonishing conclusion.
Which is?
That the deepest, most fundamental truth about who you are is not personal. Your true nature is not an individual, separate entity.
Let's unpack the specific methodologies here, because it's not just poetic metaphor, right? It's like a technology of consciousness. Take the ancient Indian texts, the Upanishads. They arrived at this grand declaration, Tam Asi, which translates to thou art that, or you are that.
And the mechanism they used to arrive there wasn't debate. It was a process of rigorous negation, often described as neti-neti, meaning not this, not this.
How does that work in practice?
Well, the practitioners would sit and systematically observe their experience. They would ask, am I this physical sensation? No, I'm aware of it, so it is an object. Am I this thought? No, I am observing the thought arise and pass away, so I am not the thought.
They relentlessly discarded anything that could be observed.
Until the only thing left was the unobservable, pure capacity to witness. And they realized that this pure witness, the ultimate subject, is fundamentally identical to the ultimate reality of the universe.
You aren't a drop of water trying to understand the ocean. You are the entire ocean expressing itself briefly as a drop.
A profound, direct realization. And then you look at the Buddhist tradition, which centers heavily on the concept of anatta, or non-self.
But not as a philosophy.
Right, the Buddha didn't present this as a philosophical postulate to be argued in a courtyard. He presented it as an empirical observation to be discovered through vipassana or insight meditation.
By paying granular, microscopic attention.
Yes, paying extreme attention to the arising and passing of physical sensations and mental formations. The practitioner directly experiences the reality of impermanence. They see exactly as Hume did, but through direct sustained meditation rather than conceptual logic, that there is no central thinker, there are only passing thoughts.
And this realization isn't just limited to Eastern traditions either. You see the exact same pointing in the Christian mystics.
Oh, everywhere. Figures like St. John of the Cross or Meister Eckhart, they spoke at length about the necessity of absolute self-emptying.
They talked about dying before you die.
Which doesn't mean physical death.
Right. It means the complete psychological death of the ego, the false separate self, which they viewed as the only barrier to recognizing continuous union with the divine.
And then the Sufi poets like Rumi and Hafiz, they use a completely different vocabulary, speaking of ecstatic dissolution.
Dissolving into the beloved.
Exactly. They write about melting the individual identity, surrendering the boundaries of the self into the ocean of love. And Taoism approaches it through the concept of the uncarved block.
Stripping away the acquired layers.
Stripping away all the artificial layers of societal conditioning, language, and conceptual categorization to return to the pure, unmediated source of being.
So we have God, Source, Tao, Brahman, emptiness, the beloved. The vocabulary shifts depending on the culture, but the pointer is identical. They are all directing us to look beyond our historical timeline, beyond our accumulated personality, and beyond our conceptual thoughts. They are pointing to an awareness that is completely unborn.
And this is where we really have to pause and look at the direct implications of that word, unborn. Looking at how Joe Bandra frames this in the text brings us to an incredibly deep insight. Bodies appear and disappear. Thoughts and emotions come and go. But the awareness that notices these changes, has that awareness itself aged? Can awareness get wrinkled? Can it have a birthday or attend its own funeral?
That is the crux of the entire deep dive. Does awareness age?
But I have to stop you here because
Okay.
this is where the spiritual rubber meets the very painful, very physical road.
Okay, what's the hang-up?
It is wonderfully poetic to sit in a meditation retreat and talk about timeless, unborn awareness. But for the listener right now, the person on their way to work who woke up this morning and had to look at new gray hairs in the mirror, whose knees ache when they climb the stairs, this can sound like high-level denial.
I get that.
How does someone reconcile this abstract concept of an unwrinkled, unaging awareness with the visceral, undeniable reality of a decaying physical body? The pain demands our attention. It demands our attention, and it absolutely should. The mistake is thinking that recognizing awareness means denying the reality of the physical world.
Which it doesn't.
It doesn't at all. Your knees do hurt, your hair is graying. The biological vehicle is subject to entropy and decay, just like we talked about in the physical lens. But let's break down the mechanics of how you actually experience that decay. Let's take the gray hair in the mirror.
Okay, let's walk through it. I am looking in the mirror. I see the physical evidence of aging.
You see the gray hair. The biological object has aged. The data has changed, but look at the knowing of the gray hair. Look at the invisible, silent capacity of awareness that is registering the image in the mirror.
The capacity to see.
Yes. Does the capacity to see, the raw space of knowing itself, have a gray hair? Is the knowing of the gray hair today any older or any different in its fundamental nature than the knowing of a brown hair 20 years ago?
Oh, no. The knowing is identical. The image on the screen changed from brown to gray, but the screen itself didn't change color.
Exactly. The knee pain is a sensation appearing in awareness. The pain is intense, it fluctuates, and it is a clear sign of biological degradation. But is the awareness of the pain degraded? Does the awareness itself ache?
No.
No. The objects within awareness are entirely subject to time, decay, and death. But the space in which they appear is untouched by the objects it holds.
The knowing of the pain is not in pain. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It changes everything.
But to actually live that shift, to move from abstract poetry to concrete reality, we have to drop the books. We have to leave the history and the mystical traditions behind and look directly at our own immediate experience right this second. Which brings us to the fifth lens, direct knowing.
Right. Direct knowing is the ultimate acid test. It cannot be borrowed from a book. It cannot be absorbed from this deep dive, and I cannot magically transmit it to you.
It's purely experiential.
It is the immediate, unmediated practice of noticing your own presence right now in this exact second before your mind even has a chance to generate a thought about it.
So for the person listening right now, walking the dog or doing the dishes or driving their car, just pause for a fraction of a second before your brain jumps to the grocery list or an email you forgot to send. Just notice the simple, undeniable fact that you are aware, the feeling of being.
Ask yourself, are you present? Yes. Did you have to create that presence through effort?
No.
Can you improve your foundational awareness by thinking harder about it?
No, it's just there.
Can it be damaged by a negative thought? No. It is simply, effortlessly, continuously here. It is the background hum of existence. And when we deeply analyze the relationship between this silent awareness and the chaotic experience of our lives, we discover the illusion we've been running from.
Because everything we consider to be us is actually an object appearing inside that awareness.
Let's trace it down. Your physical body is a collection of sensory perceptions: pressure, temperature, kinesthetic feedback. You are aware of those sensations. Therefore, The body is appearing inside your awareness.
It's an object in the space.
Right. Your thoughts are mental phenomena. You are aware of a thought arising, playing out, and dissolving. Therefore, thoughts appear inside awareness. Everything else changes, but awareness simply knows.
Even the deeply intimate psychological feeling of, I am this specific person, I have this specific history. That feeling is itself just another passing thought, appearing inside awareness.
The contents of consciousness are in constant motion, but consciousness itself is perfectly still.
The source text uses 3 brilliant analogies to lock this understanding in, and I really want to unpack them deeply because they bridge that gap between theoretical concept and direct feeling. The first one is the movie screen.
The screen is perhaps the most accurate modern metaphor we have.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a movie theater screen playing an incredibly violent, explosive war film. On the screen, you see fire, destruction, tragedy, and death. The characters on the screen are suffering immensely. But no matter how intense the explosion in the movie gets, the physical fabric of the screen is never actually burned.
It doesn't sense.
Not at all. It remains entirely untouched, silently holding the image of the fire.
The second analogy from the text is the ocean. If you look at the surface of the ocean during a hurricane, it is terrifying. Massive, violent waves, chaos, and churning water.
Total turbulence.
Right. But if you dive 100 feet down, the deep water is perfectly still. The deep water is never harmed by its own surface waves. It allows the waves to rise and fall without losing a single drop of its own essence.
And the third analogy is the sky. The sky is this vast, boundless container for all weather. It holds terrifying